the passage of the gospel today is from chapter 18, and it's from the title of the chapter is Many Are Called, but Few Are Chosen. And here's the item 3. Here's the passage. Enter through the narrow gate, for wide is the gate, and broad is the road that leads to destruction, and many enter through it. But small is the gate, and narrow the road that leads to life, and only a few find it. So I'll start with just talking about what exactly does destruction mean. What does life mean, and what is Jesus that tells us in Matthew, verse 7, chapter 7, verse 13 through 14. What exactly is he trying to say there with destruction? So we can think figuratively of destruction being like a road to eternal punishment. So the gate of destruction. So it's a road to eternal punishment, or what we would call hell, or what we would know as hell. And then life, what does exactly life mean? So life would be the state of eternal happiness, somewhat what we would refer to as heaven, right? But then you guys could come back and ask me, oh, Gabby, in your last talk you said that there was really no heaven and no hell. Remember we talked about that? So it is true, right? So in the Spiritist Doctrine, and we come to find that out through a lot of Kardec's codification works, so the 5 codification works. And in the book Heaven and Hell, he reminds us that in the spiritual world, or in this world where we are, there is really no heaven and no hell. It's really all a state of mind, a state of our consciousness that we have created for ourselves. And then I go back to how many of us, if we're talking about our conscience, how many of us could sincerely, from the bottom of our hearts, say that we can go through that narrow door, being that our conscience is completely clear, we have followed the natural law or the divine law throughout our entire lives, and then we can really start to understand, if I haven't followed, or if we haven't followed, you can do a little bit of digging in your own conscience. But if we haven't followed that, if we know that the divine law is so hard to follow, we start to ask, why did Jesus say that then? Am I completely lost? If in this life I didn't follow my my conscience, or have that written, or follow the law of the natural law, the law of God written in my conscience. So if I didn't do that, what's to be left of me? Am I going to go straight to that destruction? And again, the law of cause and effect reminds us that, and reassures us that we can come back, and again, make sure that we are doing only the things that makes us happy, which is following God's law. So we will go through iterations of expiations, right? So trials and expiations, and so we know that that's a way for us to finally find that narrow door, or that narrow gate, specifically in this translation. So the other thing we should remember too is that we're created simple and ignorant, and that we have the ultimate goal of reaching perfection. So again, by following the natural law, God's law, we will make sure that we go through those iterations and finally find that narrow gate to life. So we are on earth, and then the other thing that Kardec also tells us is that, we ask, well, but what's the connection? Why is that door so narrow? The narrow door is so narrow for the door of life, and why is that gate so wide for the destruction? And it is because we're on earth, even though we have been created simple and ignorant, and we have progressed some. We're still in the process of evoluting. This is a world of trial and expiations. This is a world of passions, where evil reigns for the most part, and most people still take that pathway of evil. And so that's why here on earth, the door, necessarily needs to be a little bit wider, right? Because the majority of us are still going through that evolutionary process. So therefore, we're not morally and intellectually evolved yet, so we still need to get there. the door to life, the narrow door, the door to hope, and I keep saying door, I'm sorry, it's because my book said door. And, when I say door, please make sure you understand that it's gate. So, the door to hope, light, happiness, goodness is really hard, right? So some do make through it. Like I said, the majority of us are still in that have still evil tendencies. But it's hard, right? It's something that we've never had to do before because we're not evoluted sufficiently enough to go through that narrow gate. So again, only a few of us can really climb through all those big mountains on the way and then get to the top, and go through that narrow door, right? So climb all of the vicissitudes of our life and all the hardships and things like that, and really have that natural law always stuck in our conscience and always follow it. But again, the one thing that's very important to remind us, the gospel and its amazing, comforting words also tell us that for us to get to that higher, top of the mountain, the higher mountains are always going to be the most worthwhile. And so for us to get closer to those benevolent spirits, that always tells us that the goodness will finally reign on earth. So essentially, earth, we will change, we will transform, we will become evolved enough, and earth will change with us as well. So then finally, that door will become, the door of life will become wider as we evolve with it. And again, we have to make sure that we are following the instructions of the higher order spirits, that we're following our conscience, that is prescribed, that God's law is prescribed in it. And a great summary of it is in the Spiritist maxim, which is that without charity there is no salvation, and it's mentioned several times in this chapter. So as long as we're following that, and eventually one day we'll get to understand, accept, and live all of the teachings that our guiding model Jesus has told us, and we will eventually go through that narrow door. We will someday all make it through and see that beautiful view on top of that mountain. Thank you.